Today, the ds-incubator is about publishing Shiny apps, which I kind of have been promising since the beginning, and we never got to that. So it's now the time, now that we are wrapping up the series. There may be another meetup, but I haven't yet kind of talked to the people that I would like to invite to talk for the next meetup, so I won't commit. So this might be the last one, or maybe there will be one more about Shiny. So the focus, again, is this idea that, once you build a Shiny app, how do you share it with the world? And I thought of what criteria to use to choose the methods that I would like to present to you today. And the very first criteria is, I just chose methods that are free to use. So I'm not going to talk about, for example, you own a server and you pay money to have it online. And that's our case. We can provide that to you if that's useful. But for now, I want to make this talk more general. So for accessibility, I'm thinking of methods that are free to use. And then I thought of, okay, the complexity of the setup, mostly from the perspective of that who builds the application. So the three options that I'm going to be presenting today are super simple, moderately complex, and complex. And then the other criteria is who is your audience. So is your audience someone who is going to be using your app exclusively through the web browser, or is your audience someone who has R, so you expect them to be interacting with your app in a system that they are running R, right? So themselves. So those are the criteria that I use to cherry pick the specific methods that I'm going to be just overviewing today. Because the issue with publishing is that there is a lot of very specific ways to set things up depending on the publishing method that you're going to be using. So it's, we can get deep into the details and spend the whole meetup talking about just one method. So instead, I'm going to give you an overview of this, broad range of methods, but there is a lot more, many more methods, and a lot more to learn about each method. So instead, today, I'm going to just hopefully nudge you in the right direction. And if you're interested, I posted on the README file of the syllabus, on the syllabus of today, I posted links to learn more and to examples. So I'm going to be basically covering that today. So actually one good page, I think, to show you could be, let's see if that, yeah, here. So on the repo where we host this series, the ds.shiny repo, the syllabus includes now a heading called publishing. And what I have just said is basically the outline of what's written here. So we're going to be starting here. So let's start with simple methods for users that are going to be interacting with your app from the web browser. So for that, the simplest that it can get for you as a developer to share stuff and for the users to use your app is very likely shinyapps.io, which is service developed by the Shiny team, I guess. And it's pretty easy to set up and pretty easy for the user to use an app that is hosted there. So users, so basically, you go to shinyapps.io, which looks something like this. Sorry, actually, I think I'm not sharing my screen, right? There you go. Okay, so thank you. This is your pretty faces for now, and let's go back to. So what I was talking about and not showing was this. So in the repo ds.shiny in our organization on GitHub, then you will find now a heading called publishing under our syllabus with these kind of 3 dot points. I'm going to be talking first about super simple methods, both simple for those who set things up and those who use the app. Secondly, something that is in the middle, and then third, more complex methods that involve R packages. So starting simple, what I was saying is you log into shinyapps.io, you just go to shinyapps.io, and then it's kind of tricky that the login, to get to the login, you have to click on the sign up, I think, which is, I find it super confusing. But anyway, I'm pretty sure you'll figure it out. Eventually, you will be able to log into shinyapps.io. Of course, you have to have an account there. And once you have an account there, everything happens through our studio. So say that I have this very simple app here. that you're seeing on screen. So I ran this script here, I sourced that script, and that popped up this super simple app where I write my name and the app greets me. So I could click here on the publishing button. I think that I have the same options here, I believe. So the one that I want now is manage accounts. I'm gonna pretend that I want to connect to a new account. And then you could choose the services. Usually, this window will populate automatically with like the common options for RStudio, shinyapps.io, and RStudio Connect. I'm not going to be talking about RStudio Connect because it's basically a paid service for the most part of it. So instead, I'm going to be talking about shinyapps.io. When you click there, you do get instructions, including a link to shinyapps.io. And then the instructions, basically what they are saying here is that there is this white space here, right, where I'm typing stuff. In that white space, you need to paste some code. And where that code comes from, well, that comes from here, from shinyapps.io. So the instructions are going to tell you to click here on your name, go to the token section. I'm not going to show you my secrets, but they are here. So at some point, the instructions tell you to click on one of these buttons and then, copy the code that generates and paste it there. So that's how you set things up in shinyapps.io. And we do have, I have, published apps there. Let's see, Mauro Lepore, shinyapps.io. I have this app called, for example, admin app. So you can see how the URL that I'm typing here starts with my name, then follows with shinyapps.io, and then the name of the app. The name of the app is something that you can control when you are about to publish the app. So this is just kind of to show that yes, the publishing platform works. You can host any app. So this is an extremely simple app, actually one that I use for creating the invoices that I do for 2 Degrees Investing. You're welcome to use them if you find them useful. And also one app that I use for completing the timesheets when the allocation for different projects is a mess. And it's a nightmare to calculate the percent time that I have to allocate to everything. But the point here is not to talk about the app itself, is to talk about this thing. shinyapps.io is a simple service to set up and a simple service to use. As you could see, it wasn't in R that I was using the app. As a user, I was just navigating the app through the web browser. So if your audience is someone who you expect not to have R or not to want to use R, then that's a good thing to use. Okay, let's move on to the second super simple way to share apps, and that is basically if your app is simple enough that you can fit it all in one script, like in the example that I have here on the screen. Let's see if I can close my options. Yeah, so I have this very simple app, right? So this app is a standalone thing. Includes not only the code, right, this thing here, but also includes the environment in which that code needs to run. I need to have Shiny attached, the package Shiny attached to my session. So this line 1 describes the environment. So with that being a standalone thing, I can select the whole thing and send it to anyone, right? Because anyone who has this thing can do the same that I'm doing here, can highlight the code and click, hit Control and Enter, and that will run the app, right? So that's one simple way to share an app, basically to create a reproducible example or short reprex. So one way in which I love to share reprexes is on gist.github.com. So GitHub, as you know, allows you to create repos, which you can think of them as a folder with a bunch of stuff in it. And gists are the same idea, something that you can track through time for all the changes that you do, but it's simpler in that there is no structure, there is no folder, it's just one file. So if I want to create a gist with my app, I'm gonna call it my app.md. I like MD because MD stands for Markdown, so I can paste code there and use the syntax that I'm already familiar with. So I'm gonna do backtick R, then paste the code, and again backtick. So that will create an R chunk when I create the gist. It defaults to secret gist, but I'm gonna do a public gist because this app say that I want to share it with you now. So as you see, this is the code that's I now need to send not the code, just the URL by email or whatever. And usually I like to shorten URLs, so I do git.io, which is aware of links that live on GitHub, and then you can shorten them. So nice. So now this is what I could send you, and then you can just paste that beautiful short link that starts with git.io. You can paste it in any new browser, and you should be able to get the. What did I just do? I think I didn't copy correctly. Let's see if that works now. No, something is happening here that I'm not able to copy.
You select that to.
Ah, you are right. I'm copying here the rest of the stuff too. Thank you. Lovely, someone is paying attention, right? Okay, so that's it. So this is what I would send you on Slack, for example, so that then you can serve yourself to the code, copy that and paste it on R, and that will run. So that's simple for you to set up, as simple as it gets, but then the person on the other end needs to have R, right? So they need to know what to do with this thing. So it's kind of simplest for the developer and not so simple for the user. So now let's move on to the one approach that this is probably the one that I wanted to, I'm more excited to talk about. It's kind of a little awkward, but I think it's pretty cool. It's the project mybinder.org. So one restriction that you have when you use shinyapps.io for free and you don't pay money to our studio is that there is a limited number of apps that you can host there, and then you can run out of available apps, and it's very limited, something like 5 or something, I don't know. So if you want to share with the world 20 apps or 50 or 500, what do you do if you don't want to pay money? Okay, so you can use the project mybinder.org to let's first go there to see what that website looks like. I don't have it here, but let's just type it, mybinder.org. So this is it. The project is explains itself. If you're interested in knowing more, how cool this is for reproducibility, both in R, Python, and Julia as well. So you can click there in R and learn kind of more of the instructions about how things work. But this very first page that you saw is also an interface to create URLs that when someone gets that URL, that will start a whole server for free for that person to host a specifically application. It could be an instance of our studio, or it could even be a Shiny app. So the person that I found that explained this approach really well is someone I know called Florencia. Here are the details in the beautiful format of presentation, a slide presentation. So if you're interested, that README that I wrote has a link to this presentation. So lovely presentation that explains how to set things up. So the long story made short is this. So you need a new file that is called install.r, where you will declare calls like install.packages shiny. So any package that you need, it needs to be installed. And Miner knows about that through this kind of generic file called install.r. And then there is this other odd file called runtime.txt. That's another file that you need to include in your app. And you put those two files at the root. So I'm going to show you maybe an example here. So this is, for example, the GitHub repo of an app hosted on GitHub is going to be served through binder.org. So basically it has a folder that contains the file app.r inside it, and then it has this file install.r and runtime.txt. The runtime.txt the only thing that it does is explains the R version that you want to run and the exact date from which you would like all packages to be installed. So basically a snapshot of mrun, which is like a clone of cran, based on a particular date in the history of the world. So that's what it is. Then it's for the user. So the setup, as you see, there is a few files involved, so it's a bit tricky. But for the user, it's beautiful because they just get a link, and there is nothing that they need to do other than click a link. So for the user, the experience is very fluid. They can use your Binder Shiny app from the web browser only. They don't need to have R. Binder will spin a server, and that server is going to be free for everyone. So here is, for example, the link to the app that Florencia is hosting here. So I can click here. That's the served version of that application that is hosted on GitHub. So you push the source code to GitHub, and then Binder, if you give Binder the right URLs, then Binder will know what to do with that. It will look into that repository. It will create a server, using Docker and a bunch of other technologies, and will eventually kind of show you what you want, which is the app to interact with. This does take a time, so that is kind of the downside. And the reason why it takes time is because it's freaking creating a whole Docker container for you, including all the scripts. So it's a very standalone thing and excellent for reproducibility. Of course, it takes a little while to spin. But I think it's perfect, for example, for publishing papers that come with some code that needs to run. It could be a Shiny app, but again, it could also be an RStudio project, meaning that if the reader of your paper wants to use your code, you can give them already a URL that they can serve themselves to actually run the code that you build. So here is the app. As you can see, the URL is a little clunky. It's developed by Binder. It's not a user-friendly URL, but you can always shorten it, I guess. And here is the app Florencia built. I guess it's a demo where you can play with these parameters and get beautiful programming art there. So that's the end of Binder, of what I want to talk about Binder. So let's go back to our map for today, and I acknowledge that we are at 20 past. So the last section I wanted to talk about is the more complex methods based on R packages. Maybe many of us will not get there, and will be using either Binder or the other two simpler methods that I mentioned, meaning that I'm very comfortable now making a pause, asking for questions or comments, and if we have time, we keep talking about methods based on R packages, and if we don't, we don't. So let's go back to the main room now. Do we have questions or comments? Jackson.
So just a question for Binder. Does it spin up like a Docker container every time you click on the link? So it wouldn't it'll take that long every time you send that link?
Yes and no. Thanks. Great question. The first time someone creates spins a container, the container is created, so it will take as long as it takes. The second time and other times, if you don't change anything in the repo, it will reuse the container. So Jackson, is already familiar with Docker, and he knows that Docker has an amazing cache system, meaning that Docker knows what stuff can be reused and what stuff has to be rebuilt. So for example, it will not install packages again if the packages are already available in the cache. So does that answer your question, Docker? First, Jackson, the first Jackson, now I call you not Docker. The first time is gonna I think you're gonna be happy with that. The first time is gonna be super long. It's gonna take as long as it takes to create a container and install whatever you chose that app to have. And second time and onwards, it will be a lot faster. It will still take some time, but it will be a lot faster. Until the time when, of course, you change your repo, right? And then the Docker container that is gonna be using that repo detects that there are changes that require the container to rebuild. So the cache is invalidated. Yeah.
Thank you.
Monica?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's a stupid question, but I'm thinking, so we now have a project in which we might want to use our Shiny, but with classified data, or like with data that should remain on the computer of the users. Is it possible to build such an app, or is it like if you send the data to the app, then it lands somewhere in the cloud, and then basically it's not safe enough?
I will forward that question to Mirja if you feel comfortable to answer that. We kind of have a preview conversation about this idea of completely separating the concern of keeping the data private from the concern of doing anything with the data. Miria, do you have anything to say, or I think Alex may have something to say too?
Actually, I'd rather pass straight to Alex on this one.
Go ahead, Alex.
What a requirement. I think the best option is if the data has to require the user to, if the data is required to not leave the user's computer, then the only option available to us is to have them have R on that computer. There's no way of getting around that. And we will probably need to package the Shiny dashboard or application as an R package and distribute it that way.
Yeah, that's a topic that I would really like to have some hands-on experience, because I've been thinking a lot about the two concerns of the code, keep it public if you can, the data, keep it private if you have to, and then how to marry those two things. But because I work, I think all my work is open source, so I never actually had that challenge for real in production. So I'm very happy to be included in one of those projects that are aiming to have public source code and private data. I want to learn more about that. Miria?
I'm not sure if I completely understand the context of this problem, but wouldn't the confidential data only be confidential to a certain point? So one could kind of split it between a data pre-processing step that it has to happen locally, but that could then call a Shiny app as soon as the data is in a way that it may be posted to some cloud. Like, for example, I don't know if the raw input data has to stay local, maybe the aggregates can already be processed properly. Alex?
Yeah, so I don't know the specifics of this project yet, but speaking generally, a lot of our clientele gets really twitchy about their data leaving their system at all. And so going through a process like that might be useful, but we would have to provide guarantees that there is no way to reverse engineer the aggregate data or any data that is processed in order to gain access to anything even approximating the source. And that I've tried to make that guarantee before, and it's really hard, especially if you want to get any usable aggregates out. So I think the simpler, plus at that point, like, if they're going to be doing that much heavy lifting anyway, we might as well just let them finish it out and do the graphics layer by themselves.
Monica?
Yeah, it's the case of working with supervisors, so I'm pretty sure that there is no way that even actually it's not about aggregating data, so they would like to see data for each institution, so I think it wouldn't work.
Jackson, before Jackson, one quick plug there is I highlight the importance of toy data, because you build a product that you want to show people how they can use it in their own environment, controlled environment, and with their own private data. So if we don't have at least some kind of fake data, we can't even show or teach people how to use it. And that's still concerningly the issue for example, even Pacta, which is our main product. We still don't have accessible toy data sets. Jackson?
Yeah, just kind of backing up what everyone else is saying, that I like this is a problem that's going to come up again and again, I think, not a problem, but like something that's not going to go away. And the idea of like seemingly sensible rules of data not leaving a certain institution, and then also totally arbitrary rules of data not leaving an institution, And like I think my favorite example is like Nordea has a law in place or like a rule in place internally that the data is not allowed to leave the concrete of their building, which like does not even make sense. But it's actually like in in like a document I had to sign that I had to agree to that it's not allowed to leave like the four walls that enclose this building. So I think we would be better off brainstorming, like considering that so many of our I don't know, not like users are these people. I think we would be better off trying to figure out like what exactly our approach is to that. And I think in that sense, like our package Shiny app works super well as long as we can get it in a stable environment and make it easier for them to run. They can run it locally and kind of do everything they need.
Cool. Alex, I pass the ball to you, but in a moment, before I wanted to kind of make the connection between a bit more detailed connection between our packages and Shiny apps. Remember that in our packages you can pack Shiny apps. That means that as Alex just suggested, we could build a package that has a Shiny app internally and distribute the package only, and then the users install the package in their own system where they have their own private data, and that's even without connection to internet, and they can spin the Shiny app that we built and we distribute it. We might distribute it through CRAN or whatever, but then when they use it, it's totally under their control and they don't even need internet. So that's why we could deliver like a public software and then they use their private data. Sorry, Alex, go ahead, and then you have Monica.
No, I just wanted to, I guess, echo that point. You beat me to it. But speaking from my own experience, when I was working in government, trying to bring new software into a secure system was generally a 6 to 12 week process. If I wanted to get like a computer with R installed on it, that was going to be between 2 and 4 months to get that to happen. But if at any point I wanted to move data outside of the secure zone, I knew that was going to be a 6 to 9 month process in order to go through and check all the boxes for that. So there's like, policies are in place for good reasons, but they are incredibly punitive to anyone trying to do active development. So what we can do is, if we make something very well documented what all of the dependencies are, that gives the users at whatever institution basically the description of, here is the machine that I need IT to allocate. Because the most common way that they solve this problem is they will go set up a new machine with all of the software on it, remove it from the internet so there is no network access, and then load the data on it and let the analyst use it then. So it's having everything set up correctly the first time becomes really important, because again, if you're missing a dependency somewhere in there, that's another like 2 or 3 weeks that you're delaying the whole thing.
Cool.
If I can quickly ask a random question there, because I might actually have to do one of those things. And how does then, because one is not allowed to access the internet, so one cannot bring any prepared code, does one have to type everything from scratch in such a situation, or?
So what generally has happened, and each place does it a little bit differently, but what I had access to was I would tell them all the dependencies, all the package versions that I needed. They would load that on there, and then I would have access to the data files on the network and the basically a copy of all of my network share. And the important thing was like, it had those two very specific read-only network accesses, so that I couldn't import or export anything that wasn't supposed to be. And it generally, the software, no matter how bad it was, couldn't like call home and exfiltrate the data that way.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm excited to see the conversation flying. I've read a suggestion, I think it was by Monica, to continue the conversation also in the Dev Hangout. I want to be mindful of the time. We're hitting the mark where we should wrap up. Is there any last kind of departing comment before we call it a session? Okay, then yeah, excited to see this conversation proposed as a new topic for the Dev Hangout. And for now, I say thank you for joining the ds-incubator. See you next time.